On a quiet winter morning in a small American town, a 70-year-old widow walked into her favorite diner, just looking for a warm cup of coffee. But what happened next would shake the entire community, uncovering secrets buried under years of silence and snow. This is a story about courage, justice, and a son who returned from war to defend the one person he loved most. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from today? Let me know in the comments below and stay with me until the end, because what starts with one act of cruelty will end with a miracle that no one saw coming. The morning light in Maple Ridge, Montana, drifted pale and cold across the horizon, a thin veil of mist rising from the frozen lake. Snow fell steadily, thick and soft, layering the quiet town like a white quilt pulled up over its sleeping heart. Chimneys whispered gray smoke into the wind, and the steady hum of the diner's old neon sign flickered faintly. Snow-capped diner, coffee, pie, and warm hearts. Inside, the warmth of butter and roasted coffee mingled with the faint sound of a radio crooning a 1970s love song. At a corner booth sat Eleanor Hart, a 70-year-old widow who carried her years with a kind of quiet grace. Her silver hair was neatly pinned beneath a knitted maroon hat, and her face, lined with soft wrinkles, held the calm wisdom of someone who had survived both war and widowhood. Eleanor had been a school teacher for 40 years before retiring to her small cabin by the lake. Her husband, Thomas, had passed away a decade ago, leaving her with memories and the faith that people were still good at heart. She lived alone now, her only constant companions, the letters from her son and the stillness of the frozen woods. Every morning she visited the diner, not because the coffee was exceptional, but because it was familiar. She liked the chatter, the clinking of spoons, the faint hum of the heater. On this particular morning, she sat by the window, hands wrapped around her mug, gazing at the snow that swirled outside. Her breath fogged the glass as she whispered to herself, "Thomas would have loved this winter." Behind the counter was Chloe Vance, a young waitress in her mid-20s with freckles across her nose and eyes the color of amber syrup. She was the kind of girl who smiled even when her feet hurt, and she often gave free refills to old customers who looked lonely. She had dreams of leaving Maple Ridge to study culinary arts in Seattle, but life and debt had pinned her down here. To Eleanor, Chloe was like a granddaughter, bright, unspoiled by bitterness. The diner door opened with a harsh jingle of the bell. The cold air swept in before the man did. Clint Barrett stomped snow off his boots and took off his fur-lined coat, revealing a heavy flannel shirt stretched over a broad belly. He was in his late 40s, his face coarse and ruddy from years of whiskey and winter. Clint was a contractor who fancied himself powerful, loud, impatient, and used to getting what he wanted. His voice carried across rooms like the echo of an engine. Chloe stiffened the moment she saw him. "Morning, Mr. Barrett," she said softly, trying not to draw attention. But Barrett didn't come for coffee. He came for confrontation. "Morning, Eleanor," he said, pulling out the chair across from her without asking. "You still thinking about that little cabin by the lake?" Eleanor looked up, polite but firm. "It's my home, Mr. Barrett. Has been for over 40 years. He chuckled, leaning back. "Yeah, well, the lakefront's gonna be something soon. The mayor's got plans for a winter resort. You should take the offer while it's good. You'll get more than market value. I'm not selling." Barrett's smile thinned. "You sure? Folks your age shouldn't have to worry about repairs and cold nights. That place is old. You could freeze out there if the heater quits." Eleanor's eyes, soft moments ago, now steadied with quiet strength. "I've survived colder nights than that." A few heads turned in the diner, but no one spoke. Maple Ridge was a small town. Everyone knew Barrett had ties to the sheriff and the mayor. No one wanted trouble. Chloe fidgeted behind the counter, biting her lip, whispering to another customer, "He's drunk again." Barrett's voice grew louder, his pride prickling under the weight of being defied by a 70-year-old woman. "You think you're better than me, huh? Just because your boy was a Navy SEAL?" The words hit the air like frost. Eleanor didn't respond. She simply took a sip of her coffee, eyes still steady. That calmness enraged him. Before anyone could intervene, Barrett's hand lashed out. The sound of the slap cracked through the diner, sharp and shocking. Eleanor's hat flew off as she fell sideways onto the linoleum floor. The mug shattered beside her, spilling coffee that mixed with the melted snow from Barrett's boots. For a moment, The whole diner froze. Even the radio seemed to pause mid-song. Chloe gasped and ran forward, kneeling beside Eleanor. "Mrs. Hart, are you okay?" she cried. Eleanor's cheek burned red, but her dignity remained untouched. She slowly pushed herself up, whispering, "I'm fine, dear." Near the counter, a young tourist, a college student from Colorado passing through town, had filmed the whole thing on his phone, his hands trembling. No one stopped him. No one dared stop Barrett either. Barrett looked around, daring anyone to challenge him. His face was flushed with rage and liquor. "She had it coming," he spat. That was when the diner door opened again. The wind rushed in, carrying a swirl of snowflakes and silence. Standing there was Cole Hart, Eleanor's son, a man of 35, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark winter coat lined with tactical wool. His jaw was set, the faint scar under his left eye visible beneath the brim of his cap. Cole had the stillness of a soldier who had seen too much. His blue eyes, cold and steady, scanned the room with the precision of a man trained to assess threats. Beside him padded Ranger, a German shepherd, 4 years old, sable and tan fur glistening with snowflakes. The dog's amber eyes were alert yet gentle, his every movement disciplined. Ranger had served with Cole during his deployment, a military K-9 trained in search, rescue, and protection. Since returning home, the two had been inseparable. Cole often said Ranger was the last soul from the battlefield who never judged, never left. Cole took in the scene, his mother's trembling hands, Chloe's tears, Barrett's sneer, and something in him shifted. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move fast. He simply stepped forward, each boot leaving a mark in the melting snow on the floor. "Mom," he said quietly, kneeling beside her, "are you hurt?" Eleanor shook her head. "Just startled." He stood, facing Barrett. The two men locked eyes. One radiated arrogance, the other controlled fury. Cole's voice came low and even. "Apologize," Barrett scoffed. "Or what? You gonna sick your mud on me, soldier boy?" Cole didn't answer. He simply said one word to Ranger. "Watch." The German shepherd moved in front of Eleanor, posture tense, growl low. Not wild, but precise. A warning honed by training. His eyes never left Barrett. Every breath in the diner seemed to stop. From outside, the faint wail of wind pushed against the windows. Snow tapped softly against the glass, as if the world itself was waiting. At last, Barrett backed away, muttering, "Crazy old woman, you'll regret this." He grabbed his coat, slamming the door as he left. The bell above the door jingled weakly, then went silent. Cole exhaled, helping his mother up. Chloe offered a napkin for the blood on Eleanor's lip. "Thank you, dear," Eleanor murmured, her voice steady again. "But some people need to learn that money can't buy decency." Cole glanced out the window. Barrett's truck was already vanishing into the curtain of snow. His gut told him this wasn't over. The man was part of something bigger, something that stank of politics and greed. "Let's go home, Mom," Cole said softly. "We'll talk later." As they stepped outside, the wind hit like a living thing, biting and sharp. Ranger stayed close to Eleanor's side, his breath puffing white in the cold. The world outside the diner seemed quieter now, heavier somehow. Behind them, Chloe watched from the doorway, her heart pounding. She didn't know it yet, but the video the tourist uploaded that afternoon would spread across the country before the day was done. And Maple Ridge would never be the same again. The snow kept falling, covering the footprints on Main Street, as if the earth itself was trying to hide the violence that had stained the morning. The snow in Maple Ridge thickened by the hour, blanketing roofs and roads in a blinding white. The town looked peaceful from afar, smoke rising from chimneys, the frozen lake shimmering beneath the overcast sky. But under that quiet surface, tension brewed like a storm about to break. By the time Cole Hart and his mother reached the cabin by Lake Azure, daylight had already begun to fade into the gray-blue of late afternoon. The cabin, built by his late father decades ago, stood at the edge of a pine forest. Its wood was darkened by years of winter, but the windows glowed softly from the fire burning inside. Cole opened the door first, stepping in with trained caution. He always checked corners, windows, the small signs of disturbance, habits he couldn't unlearn after years in the Navy SEALs. His tall frame moved with controlled precision, his blue eyes scanning the room before letting out a quiet exhale. "Clear," he murmured, though it was only him, his mother, and Ranger, their German shepherd. Eleanor walked in behind him, brushing snow off her coat. "You still do that every time we come home," she said, half smiling. Cole shrugged, hanging up her scarf. "Old habits, Mom." Ranger, 4 years old and disciplined to the bone, shook snow from his fur before circling near the fire. His coat shimmered golden under the glow, strong shoulders, steady breath, a gaze that seemed to understand far more than most people. He settled beside the rocking chair, where Eleanor always read her Bible in the evenings, head resting on his paws, eyes following every move of his humans. Eleanor poured 2 cups of tea. "You didn't have to step in like that, Cole," she said gently. "I didn't," he replied, sitting opposite her. He forced my hand. Her eyes softened. "I mean it, son. Men like Barrett are bullies, but bullies in Maple Ridge don't act alone. You know that." Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I saw it in his face. He wasn't acting out of temper. He was trying to make an example of you. "And he failed," Eleanor said quietly. "But he'll come back." Silence fell between them, the kind of silence heavy with unspoken truths. Cole's mind drifted to years before, the desert heat of Kandahar, the metallic smell of sand and smoke, the sound of commands shouted under fire. He had faced danger in places far from home, but this was personal. Protecting his mother wasn't a mission. It was blood. The fire popped softly. Outside, Ranger's ears twitched. He rose, padded to the window, and growled low. Cole followed his gaze. 2 sets of headlights glowed faintly down the road, half hidden behind the snow. "Stay here," he said, grabbing his coat. Minutes later, a black SUV rolled past their driveway. Inside, 2 silhouettes sat motionless, watching. Then the car slowly disappeared into the white. "They're watching," Eleanor murmured. "They won't for long," Cole answered, jaw tight. "I'll talk to Monroe in the morning." The next day, Snowcap Diner was quieter than usual. Chloe Vance tried to smile as she refilled coffee cups, but whispers filled the air. About the video, about the slap, about the man who had returned from the Navy and stared down Clint Barrett without saying a word. Sheriff Dean Monroe entered the diner mid-morning, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. Monroe was in his early 50s, tall and lean, with the weathered face of a man who had seen too many winters and too many deals behind closed doors. His badge gleamed, but his eyes, narrow and calculating, told another story. He wasn't an evil man by nature, only one corroded slowly by convenience and power. "Morning, folks," he said casually, removing his gloves. The diner fell silent. He walked to the counter, ordered black coffee, and pretended not to notice the tension that followed him like smoke. Cole entered seconds later, his coat dusted with snow, Ranger padding at his side. The 2 locked eyes, soldier and sheriff, both men of authority, but with very different loyalties. "Cole Hart," Monroe said, voice calm but tight. "Heard there was an incident yesterday. Want to tell me what happened?" Cole didn't sit. "You already know. The whole town does." "Still," Monroe said, sipping his coffee, "official business requires official accounts." "My mother was assaulted," Cole said evenly. "That's all that needs to be written." Monroe smiled thinly. "Assault's a big word. Folks say it was a misunderstanding. Barrett claims she provoked him, says she insulted his family." Cole's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "You're calling my mother a liar?" "I'm saying," Monroe replied, placing his cup down with deliberate calm, "that tensions are high. Barrett's working on some big town projects. He's got the mayor's backing. We can't let a small argument turn into a wildfire." Cole leaned in slightly. His voice dropped, quiet but dangerous. "The wildfire's already burning, Sheriff. And if you're standing on Barrett's side when it spreads, you'll be the one who gets burned." For a moment, the sheriff's jaw tightened. The room held its breath. Then Monroe gave a forced chuckle. "Easy now, son. We're all friends here. No need to make this ugly." Cole straightened up. "You made it ugly the second you called it a misunderstanding." He turned and left, Ranger following close behind, the bell over the door chiming sharply in the frozen air. Monroe watched him go, then leaned back on the counter, muttering to Chloe, "That boy's got fire in him. Dangerous kind." Chloe didn't answer. Her hands trembled slightly as she wiped the counter, remembering Eleanor's bruised face. By noon, word had spread that the sheriff had dismissed the incident as a personal dispute. The video, however, told another story. The tourist who filmed it had uploaded it online the night before, and now, within 12 hours, it was everywhere. Cole sat at his mother's kitchen table, phone buzzing constantly with notifications. News outlets from across the country had picked up the footage. Elderly widow slapped in small-town diner, son of former Navy SEAL. The title alone was enough to ignite outrage. Eleanor sat nearby, hands clasped around her teacup. "Cole, I didn't want this kind of attention." He looked up from the phone. "You didn't choose it. Barrett did." Outside, a snowstorm began to roll in, wind howling through the trees. Ranger stood by the window, tail stiff, watching the world turn white again. "Mom," Cole said, "this isn't just about you anymore. People are angry, they're asking questions." Eleanor sighed, gazing into the fire. Then maybe it's time they started looking for answers. Meanwhile, in a dim office above Cross Realty and Development, Clint Barrett slammed his fist onto the desk. "You said this would disappear," he barked. Across from him sat Mayor Albert Cross, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes and silver hair slicked back with precision. He was the kind of man who smiled for cameras and lied with elegance. "It would've," Cross replied coolly, "if you hadn't hit her in public." "She refused to sell," Barrett shouted. "You told me to pressure her." "And I told you to be subtle," Cross countered. "Now the town looks like a circus." From the corner, Sheriff Monroe spoke quietly, arms crossed. "Video's gone viral. FBI won't touch it, but state authorities might. We need to calm it down fast." Cross rubbed his temple. "Then we'll spin it. Paint the old lady as confused, maybe bitter. Say her son's unstable, a veteran with PTSD. People will believe what we feed them." Barrett smirked. "And if that doesn't work?" Cross looked up, his expression cold. "Then we make sure the hearts stay quiet." That evening, Cole stood by the frozen lake, the wind sharp enough to sting his cheeks. Ranger sat beside him, eyes reflecting the pale light of the moon. Behind them, Eleanor's cabin glowed softly through the snow, fragile, yet steadfast. Cole spoke quietly, more to himself than to the dog. "They think fear will silence us, buddy." Ranger tilted his head, ears pricking at the sound of a distant car engine echoing in the forest. Cole's jaw tightened. "Let them come. We're not backing down." The night deepened around them, heavy with the promise of reckoning. Snow had not stopped falling over Maple Ridge for 3 straight days. What began as a soft flurry had thickened into a curtain of white, muffling every sound, swallowing every trace of color. The lake behind Eleanor's cabin was frozen solid now, its surface reflecting the dim sky like a mirror of pale steel. From afar, the town seemed peaceful again, the kind of peace that came not from safety, but from fear. In the heart of Maple Ridge, inside the red brick municipal building that smelled faintly of old wood and cigar smoke, Mayor Albert Cross sat in his office surrounded by the quiet hum of power. He was a man of 62, with silver hair parted cleanly and hands too smooth for someone who claimed to care about working people. His tailored suit looked out of place among the flannel and denim of Montana. To those who met him at church on Sundays, he was charming, soft-spoken, philanthropic, always ready with a handshake and a promise. But beneath that polished exterior was a calculating mind that had long traded integrity for influence. Across from him sat Clint Barrett, the contractor whose temper had already shaken the town. His thick hands rested on the mayor's polished desk, veins bulging as he clenched his fists. He wore a worn-out bomber jacket, the collar stained with sweat and snow. The slap at Snowcap Diner had left a mark not only on Eleanor's cheek, but on Barrett's reputation, and that wound festered deeper than he wanted to admit. The third man in the room, Sheriff Dean Monroe, leaned against the window, staring out at the snow-blurred street. His badge gleamed faintly in the gray light. Monroe was a tall man, still strong in his 50s, with eyes that had once been sharp with duty but were now dull with compromise. He'd convinced himself that working with Cross and Barrett kept the peace, that as long as Maple Ridge looked stable, the rot underneath didn't matter. But lately, the rot had begun to smell. Cross broke the silence first, voice steady but cold. "We have a problem," That video didn't die down like we hoped. It's spreading. Now the governor's office is asking questions. There's talk of a review of our development projects. Barrett snorted. So what? Let them. You got the paperwork clean, don't you? On paper, yes, Cross replied, sliding a file across the desk. But these numbers don't lie. The land purchases under your company's name link back to offshore accounts. If the feds dig deep enough, they'll see where the money came from. Monroe turned, frowning. You mean the resort deal? Cross nodded. The investors from Denver, not exactly the cleanest hands. They don't like publicity. If this scandal brings heat, they'll cut us off, and you'll both be left holding the shovel. Barrett slammed a fist onto the table. That old woman started all this. She refused to sell that damn cabin. She didn't start it, Cross snapped. You did. You forgot how small towns work. People forgive corruption. They don't forgive cruelty. You hit her in front of witnesses. The tension thickened like the frost on the window. Monroe exhaled. So what now? The hearts aren't talking, but that son of hers, he's dangerous. The kind of man who doesn't scare easy. Cross leaned back, eyes narrowing. Then we don't scare him. We isolate him. He opened another folder, revealing photographs. Aerial maps, land deeds, lists of local journalists who had tried to contact Eleanor since the video went viral. We control the narrative. Barrett, you'll call a press conference. Apologize publicly, say you lost your temper, claim you've offered restitution. Monroe, you make sure the sheriff's office backs it up. Paint it as an unfortunate misunderstanding. An old grievance between families. Barrett's jaw tightened. And the Hearts? Cross's gaze hardened. If they push back, we'll remind them what happens to troublemakers in small towns. Power isn't about violence, it's about silence. Unnoticed by them, in the adjoining hall, someone else was listening. Evelyn Cross, the mayor's wife, stood motionless behind the slightly ajar door of the records room. A woman of 58. She had once been radiant. Auburn hair, soft eyes that had seen both kindness and cruelty. Years of living beside a man who traded his soul for ambition had dimmed her light, but not extinguished it. She had met Albert when they were young teachers. Back then, he'd quoted poetry and promised to build a better Maple Ridge. Now, he built lies instead. Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to her chest as she listened to the conversation. The sound of Barrett's voice made her sick. The cold precision in her husband's tone broke something deep inside her. When the men finally left, their boots crunching down the hallway, she slipped into Albert's office. The air still carried his cologne, crisp, expensive, false. On the desk, the folder with the maps and financial documents lay open. Her eyes scanned the numbers, property deeds, offshore accounts, bank transfers disguised as infrastructure grants. The scheme was bigger than she'd imagined. They weren't just building a resort, they were selling off Maple Ridge piece by piece. She whispered to herself, "How many lives will you ruin before you're satisfied, Albert?" That night, while Albert entertained guests at the lodge, Evelyn sat in her private study. Snow pressed against the windows like restless ghosts. She powered on her old laptop, inserted a small flash drive, and began copying every file she could find from the mayoral archives. Years of half-buried guilt surfaced with each click. For so long, she justified her silence, telling herself she stayed because leaving would destroy her family's name. But now, an old woman had been struck down in public, and something inside Evelyn refused to stay quiet any longer. Meanwhile, in the cabin by the lake, Eleanor read the evening news online. Her name appeared everywhere. Widow of Maple Ridge assaulted. Photos of her bruised face had become symbols of injustice. She didn't want fame, but she felt the town's eyes on her wherever she went. Cole sat beside her, watching the flames flicker in the hearth. Ranger lay at his feet, chin resting on his paws, occasionally lifting his head to listen to the wind. "Mom," Cole said quietly, "I think it's deeper than Barrett. I saw Cross's men near the diner this morning, 2 SUVs, same plates I've seen tailing us." Eleanor sighed. "You think they're trying to intimidate us? They're trying to erase us." The words hung heavy in the cabin. Before she could respond, Ranger's head shot up. His ears pricked, body tense. A sound outside, faint, deliberate, the crunch of boots on snow. Cole rose silently, took his flashlight, and peered out through the curtain. Two men in dark coats were standing near the tree line, pretending to smoke, but their posture, their stillness, it was military. "They're not locals," Cole muttered. Ranger growled low, barely audible, eyes locked on the glass. Cole whispered, "Easy, boy. Let them think we haven't noticed." He turned to his mother. "Pack a small bag, just in case." Eleanor looked at him, unafraid. "Cole, I won't run from my own home." "I know," he said softly, "but sometimes staying alive isn't running. It's waiting for the right moment to fight." Back in town, Evelyn slipped her coat on and stepped into the storm. The snowflakes clung to her lashes as she made her way through the empty streets toward the church at the far end of Maple Ridge, St. Jude's Chapel. Its bell tower stood dark against the sky, the cross at its peak faintly dusted with ice. She had arranged a message through an anonymous letter dropped at Eleanor Hart's door earlier that day. "If you want the truth about what's happening, meet me here. Midnight, Saturday." She clutched the flash drive in her gloved hand, whispering, "Lord, give me strength." For the first time in years, she wasn't acting as the mayor's wife. She was acting as a woman trying to save her soul. The storm raged harder, wind howling across the rooftops. Somewhere beyond the frozen lake, Ranger barked once, deep and resonant, as if sensing the world itself had begun to shift. In Maple Ridge, beneath the ice and snow, secrets were cracking open, one fracture at a time. The snow over Maple Ridge glowed faintly under the pale light of a half moon. It was the kind of night where even sound seemed frozen. No wind, no bird calls, just the slow whisper of flakes landing on old pine branches. In the distance, St. Jude's Chapel rose from the forest like a ghost from another century. Its steeple was capped in ice, and the small stained glass windows glimmered dimly from within, where a single candle burned beside the altar. The chapel had been built long before either Eleanor Hart or Evelyn Cross were born, a sanctuary for miners and wanderers back in the 1800s. Now, it was more a relic than a church, kept alive only by the prayers of the lonely. That night, the door creaked open on ancient hinges, and a gust of frost swept through the nave as Eleanor stepped inside. She was wrapped in her long wool coat, a knitted scarf wound tightly around her neck, snow clinging to the hem of her boots. Her face, though marked by age, held the calm determination of a woman who had endured more winters than she cared to count. Behind her padded Ranger, the German shepherd, his fur dusted white, his movements silent but alert. The flicker of candlelight reflected in his amber eyes. "Easy, boy," Eleanor whispered. "We're not here for trouble." Ranger sat beside the pew nearest the door, his head tilted, ears twitching. Moments later, another set of footsteps approached. The door opened again, and Evelyn Cross stepped in, shivering. She was dressed in a heavy navy coat lined with fur, her auburn hair pinned beneath a dark wool hat. Her face was pale, not from the cold, but from fear. Fear of what she was about to do. "Mrs. Hart," she said softly, voice trembling, "thank you for coming." Eleanor turned to face her, eyes kind but cautious. "When I received your letter, I almost thought it was a trick." "I wouldn't blame you," Evelyn replied. She looked around nervously, then walked down the aisle to the front pew, lowering her hood. "I've been part of that lie for too long. I can't be anymore." Eleanor motioned for her to sit. "Tell me everything." Evelyn took a deep breath. "My husband, Albert, he's not just building a resort. He's selling Maple Ridge. Every parcel around the lake has been purchased through shell companies. Barrett's just the face. The money comes from out-of-state developers, people who don't care about this town. They've bribed Monroe, used the sheriff's office to threaten landowners, and when someone refuses to sell," her voice faltered, "they make examples." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "So, that's what I am, an example." Evelyn's eyes glistened with guilt. "I didn't know they'd go that far. I thought it was just politics, ugly but harmless. Then I saw the accounts, the contracts, the payoffs. And after what Barrett did to you, I knew I couldn't keep quiet." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small metallic USB drive, the size of a thumb, sealed inside a plastic bag. "This has everything: the financial records, audio recordings of meetings, copies of emails between Cross and the investors. It's enough to destroy them all." Eleanor hesitated before taking it. "Why give it to me?" "Because no one else would believe me," Evelyn said. If I go to the police, they'll bury it. But your story's already out there. People trust you now. They see you as a symbol of decency, of courage." She gave a faint, broken laugh. "And I don't even recognize myself anymore." Eleanor's gaze softened. She reached out, covering Evelyn's trembling hands with her own. "You've done the right thing. It's never too late to step out of the dark." Evelyn looked down at the hands holding hers, wrinkled, firm, steady. "You remind me of my mother," she whispered. "She used to tell me that courage doesn't come from not being afraid, but from doing what's right even when you are." Eleanor smiled gently. "A wise woman." A gust of wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Both women flinched as the chapel door groaned slightly, though it didn't open. Ranger stood, hackles raised, eyes fixed on the entrance. Eleanor frowned. "Someone's out there." Evelyn's heart raced. "They followed me," Eleanor whispered. "Stay behind me." She walked to the door, placing a hand on Ranger's collar. Through the frosted glass, she could just make out a figure moving among the trees. A tall shadow, the glint of metal under moonlight. Cole had insisted on staying nearby when his mother left for the meeting, and she prayed silently it was him. The figure moved closer. Then a familiar voice cut through the cold. "Mom, it's me." The door swung open, and Cole Hart stepped in, his coat dusted white, eyes sharp with worry. "I saw headlights tailing you from town. Had to make sure you weren't walking into a trap." Eleanor sighed with relief. "Cole, this is Mrs. Cross, the mayor's wife. She's brought us something." Cole's expression shifted as he noticed the USB. "Is that proof?" Evelyn nodded, clutching her bag. "Enough to bring them all down, but they'll know it's missing soon. You need to get it out of town before morning." Cole studied her face, the fear, the guilt, the flicker of conscience. "You're risking everything." Evelyn straightened her shoulders. "I already lost everything the day I stopped standing up to him." Ranger brushed against Cole's leg, ears twitching again. The sound of a car engine faintly echoed in the distance, approaching fast. Cole's voice hardened. "We're out of time." Evelyn's breath quickened. "They found me." "Go," Eleanor urged. "Use the side door. Cole will get us home safely." Evelyn clutched her hand one last time. "Promise me one thing. If they come after you, don't stay silent. Expose them all." "I promise," Eleanor said. The mayor's wife disappeared through the side door, vanishing into the white woods. Moments later, the sound of tires crunching snow echoed outside. Two black SUVs rolled up the chapel road, headlights slicing through the storm. Cole pulled his mother behind a pillar, motioning for silence. Ranger crouched low beside him, muscles taut. The SUVs stopped, doors opened. Men in dark coats stepped out, 6 of them, heavy-built, faces hidden under wool hats. Their boots sank deep into the snow as they approached the chapel. One called out, "Mrs. Cross, we know you're in there." Cole whispered to his mother, "Stay here." He slipped toward the door, heart steady. Years of combat had taught him that fear is just another form of focus. Through the stained glass light, he could see their positions, 4 by the cars, 2 advancing. He reached for the small handgun holstered under his coat. A legal carry, but one he rarely used since leaving the Navy. He didn't plan to fire. He only needed to stall them long enough for Evelyn to get away. "Hey!" he shouted, stepping into the open doorway. "You boys lost?" The men turned, startled. The leader frowned. "This is private property." "So's my mother's land," Cole said. "But that didn't stop your boss." The man hesitated, clearly not expecting him. "You need to walk away, soldier." Cole's voice turned cold. "You're right, but not tonight." Behind him, Ranger growled, deep and resonant. The men exchanged uneasy glances. One reached into his coat. Cole raised his weapon slightly. "Bad idea." They froze. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then headlights appeared down the road, another vehicle speeding toward them. The men swore under their breath. The new arrival wasn't theirs. It was a patrol car, Sheriff Monroe's car. But instead of helping, he lowered his window and barked, "Stand down, Cole. You're obstructing an investigation." Cole laughed bitterly. "Investigation? That's what you call a hit squad?" The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "You're making a mistake, son. Go home before you get hurt." Cole lowered his weapon, but didn't move. "If anything happens to Mrs. Cross tonight, I'll make sure the world knows why." The sheriff's jaw clenched, and for a moment, the mask of law slipped, revealing the rot beneath. He gestured sharply, and the men retreated to their SUVs. Within minutes, the road was empty again, the night swallowing their headlights. Eleanor stepped out from the shadows, heart still pounding. "Cole!" He turned to her, eyes softening. "She's gone now. She'll be safe for the night. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest." Ranger rubbed against Eleanor's leg, whining softly. The candle near the altar flickered, throwing their shadows long against the wall. Eleanor held the USB tightly in her hand. "Then tonight," she whispered, "the truth begins." Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, endless, cleansing. The storm had passed, but the world outside Eleanor Hart's cabin still looked like something carved from silence. Maple Ridge slept under a shroud of frost, the lake frozen into a mirror that caught the faint reflection of the first gray light creeping over the horizon. Inside, the fire in the hearth burned low, its embers flickering like the last heartbeat of a long night. Cole Hart hadn't slept. He sat by the window, his broad shoulders illuminated by the dull glow of the fire. His eyes, sharp, tired, and watchful, followed every movement beyond the frosted glass. Ranger, the German shepherd, lay near the door, head resting on his paws, but eyes wide open, every muscle ready to move. The silence of the forest outside was deceptive. Cole had learned long ago that danger liked to come quietly. On the kitchen table lay the USB drive Evelyn Cross had risked her life to deliver. Its metallic body caught the firelight, gleaming faintly like a relic of truth in a world buried under deceit. Cole had spent most of the night connecting it to his encrypted laptop, scanning the files Evelyn had gathered, recorded conversations, financial records, wire transfers, and lists of bribes disguised as development grants. He exhaled slowly. "They were careful," he murmured, "but not careful enough." Eleanor, wrapped in her thick wool shawl, approached from the hearth. Her face was pale under the warm light, but her expression was steady, calm in a way only the deeply faithful could be. "Did you find what we need?" Cole nodded. "Everything, enough to bring them all down. Cross, Monroe, Barrett, and their friends in Denver. But it's going to take more than one man and his mother to do it." Eleanor poured tea into 2 cups, her hands trembling slightly. "Then we'll find help. Good people still exist, Cole." He gave a faint smile. "Yeah, just not in Maple Ridge?" Ranger lifted his head suddenly, ears pricking toward the forest. A faint rumble echoed from beyond the ridge, an engine, slow and heavy. Cole grabbed his binoculars and peered through the frost-covered window. A black pickup sat idling near the tree line, its headlights off. "They're here again," he whispered. "Barrett's men? Maybe, or worse." He rose, pulling on his coat. "Stay inside, Mom. Lock the door. I'll handle this." "Cole," she began, but he was already gone, Ranger trotting silently beside him. Outside, the air was bitter and sharp. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he moved through the trees, the dog following close. The pickup's engine cut off as they approached, and 2 figures stepped out, both bundled in thick coats, their faces hidden behind scarves. One carried a camera, the other a microphone. "Mr. Hart," a woman's voice called out cautiously. "Cole Hart." He raised his flashlight slightly. "Who's asking?" "Isabella Hale, NCIS," she said, pulling down her hood. Her dark hair framed a determined face, mid-30s, with eyes that carried both warmth and command. "We served together in Bahrain. You remember?" Recognition flickered across Cole's face. "Hale?" She nodded. "I got your message." Cole's stance relaxed slightly, though his hand stayed near his belt. "I wasn't sure it reached anyone." "I nearly missed it," she admitted. "You used the old SEAL comms code. Took me half a day to decrypt it. You said you had federal-level evidence tied to a local corruption ring." He gestured toward the cabin. "Inside." Eleanor met them at the door, surprised but relieved. Isabella introduced herself gently, shaking Eleanor's hand. "Ma'am, your son's a hard man to find." Eleanor smiled faintly. "He always was." Inside, Cole placed the USB on the table. "Everything's on here. Financial trails, secret land deeds, a recording of the mayor's meetings with his investors. Evelyn Cross gave it to us. She's in hiding." Isabella examined it, brows furrowed. "I'll need to verify the metadata, trace the routing of those accounts. If this holds up, it's enough for federal indictments. Cole nodded. Good, because they're not going to wait for paperwork. They'll come before sunrise. Right on cue, Ranger growled. The low rumbling sound filled the cabin. Cole turned toward the window. A pair of headlights was approaching fast from the direction of town. Then another and another. Eleanor's breath caught. They're coming here. Cole's voice was calm, decisive. Operation White Dawn begins now. He pulled open a wooden chest by the wall. Inside were neatly packed supplies, flashlights, encrypted radios, emergency rations, and a military-grade drone. You really never stop being a soldier, Isabella muttered. Didn't have a choice, he replied. Ranger, watch post. The dog leapt to the doorway, barking once, short and sharp. Outside, the whine of approaching engines grew louder. Cole grabbed his radio, switched to a secure channel, and spoke. This is Hart, calling Echo 7. Operation White Dawn is live. Send the Hawk. A crackle of static, then a voice replied. Copy that. Drone en route. ETA 5 minutes. Eleanor touched his arm. Cole, promise me you'll be careful. I will, he said, but we end this tonight. Within minutes, the forest outside exploded with light. 3 SUVs barreled toward the cabin, their headlights cutting through the snowstorm like search beams. Men spilled out, armed, shouting orders. One of them, Clint Barrett, stomped through the snow, face twisted in rage. Where's the old woman? Where's the file? He roared. Inside, Cole and Isabella exchanged a glance. She pulled her badge, shouting through the door. Federal agents, drop your weapons! The men hesitated, only for a moment, before one of them raised a rifle. But before the first shot was fired, a whirring sound filled the air. The drone, small, fast, and black, descended from above, red lights flashing. A voice boomed from its speaker. This is federal property. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons. Panic erupted. Barrett turned, cursing, as blue and red lights flared in the distance. Several black vans tore through the snow. FBI and NCIS units, lights flashing against the night. Cole stepped outside, Ranger beside him, as the agents swarmed in. Barrett, he shouted over the chaos. It's over. Barrett spun, eyes blazing. You think you've won, soldier? You don't know who you're dealing with? Cole's gaze was like steel. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Cowards hiding behind power. Barrett lunged forward, but an agent tackled him into the snow, cuffing him as he spat curses into the wind. Sheriff Monroe tried to escape through the woods, but was intercepted by 2 NCIS officers and brought down within minutes. From the main road, a black car approached slowly, and from it stepped Albert Cross, face pale as death. The mayor of Maple Ridge stood frozen as agents read him his rights. The arrogance that had defined him drained away, leaving only the trembling of an old man who finally realized the game was over. Inside the cabin, Eleanor watched silently through the window, tears of relief and exhaustion glistening in her eyes. Ranger returned to her side, pressing his warm body against her leg as if to say, It's done. Isabella approached, nodding respectfully. You raised a good man, Mrs. Hart. Eleanor smiled faintly. I just taught him to listen to his conscience. By dawn, the storm had cleared. The first rays of sunlight broke over the lake, scattering across the snow like 1,000 tiny stars. The agents were packing up, the suspects loaded into vans. The quiet of Maple Ridge was returning, not the silence of fear, but the stillness that follows truth. Cole stood beside the frozen lake, hands in his coat pockets, watching the reflection of the rising sun. Isabella joined him, her breath misting in the cold. You know, she said softly, they'll call this operation a success, but the truth is, it's just the beginning. Someone has to rebuild what they broke. Cole nodded slowly. We will. Behind them, Eleanor stepped out onto the porch, watching her son and the loyal dog at his side. The light touched her face, soft and golden. For the first time in months, she felt warmth that wasn't from fire. It was from peace. Cole, she called. He turned, smiling. You've brought justice back to this town, she said. Not with hate, but with truth. Cole's voice was quiet. You taught me that the truth doesn't always roar, Mom. Sometimes it just waits. Until dawn. As the sun rose fully over Maple Ridge, the lake shimmered and the snow began to melt. Not fast, not loud, but enough to show that spring in time would come. 1 week later, Maple Ridge no longer looked like the same town. The storm had broken, both in the sky and in the hearts of its people. The streets that once echoed with whispers and fear now filled with the sound of rebuilding, hammers, laughter, and the low hum of hope. The frozen lake had begun to thaw, patches of clear water glimmering beneath the melting ice like small windows to spring. News of Operation White Dawn had spread across Montana and beyond. Every local paper, every news channel carried the same story. Corruption ring exposed in Maple Ridge, widow's courage sparks federal investigation. For once, the name Eleanor Hart didn't belong to a victim. It belonged to a symbol. Inside the newly restored snow-capped diner, the same place where everything began, the smell of coffee and maple syrup filled the air again. The neon sign outside, once flickering weakly through the storm, now glowed bright and steady. Behind the counter stood Chloe Vance, her auburn hair tied up beneath a red bandana, apron dusted with flour. The diner had been closed for weeks during the investigation, but now, under new ownership, it was alive again. She turned the open sign and smiled to herself. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just a waitress. She was the owner. Eleanor Hart had insisted she take over, using part of the town's recovered restitution fund to help her reopen. You deserve to serve hope, not just coffee, Eleanor had told her. As Chloe poured the first cup for a customer, she looked up and froze. Through the glass, walking down Main Street, were Cole Hart and Ranger, moving together in easy rhythm. Cole wore his old brown jacket, the one with the faded Navy SEAL patch on the sleeve, and Ranger trotted beside him, tail wagging slightly, eyes alert as ever. The town's children waved as they passed, and Ranger barked once, playfully, as if greeting old friends. "Welcome back, hero," someone called from the sidewalk. Cole smiled politely but shook his head. "No heroes," he said, "just folks doing what's right." Inside the diner, Chloe stepped forward as the bell over the door rang. "Morning, stranger," she teased, handing him a mug. "Coffee's on the house, for saving the town and all." Cole chuckled. "I'll take it, but only if Ranger gets a biscuit." Ranger tilted his head as if he understood, earning laughter from everyone around. At the corner table, Eleanor Hart sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea. The bruises on her face had faded, replaced by the serene glow of peace hard won. She looked up at her son, pride shining in her gray eyes. "You look tired," she said softly. Cole smiled. "You raised me in Montana, Mom. Tired isn't in our vocabulary." They shared a quiet laugh, the kind that carried both gratitude and memory. Moments later, the diner door opened again. A hush rippled through the room as Evelyn Cross stepped in. She was dressed simply, a wool coat, no jewelry, her auburn hair tied back. There was no trace left of the mayor's glamorous wife, only a woman who had survived her own reckoning. The chatter softened as she approached Eleanor's table. "May I?" she asked. Eleanor nodded. "Always." Evelyn sat down, her eyes glistening. "They sentenced Albert yesterday. 10 years, maybe more, once the state finishes its audit. Monroe's facing federal time. Barrett, too." Eleanor stirred her tea, nodding slowly. "Justice came then." Evelyn's voice trembled. "It did, but it doesn't feel like victory." "It's not supposed to," Eleanor said gently. "Justice isn't about winning. It's about healing what people broke." Evelyn looked out the window, where the sun glinted on the melting snow. "I keep asking myself when it all went wrong. Maybe it was the first time I looked away and told myself it wasn't my problem." Eleanor reached across the table, resting a hand over hers. "The moment you chose to speak, you began to make it right." Ranger padded over, resting his head on Evelyn's knee. She smiled faintly, scratching his ears. "He trusts faster than I do." "That's because dogs don't keep score," Eleanor said, smiling softly. "They forgive without needing proof." At another table, Chloe turned up the small radio by the counter. The morning broadcast hummed through the diner. This week, Maple Ridge celebrates its rebuilding efforts following the corruption scandal that shocked Montana. Citizens have come together to restore local landmarks, including the snow-capped diner and the town's rescue station. Former Navy SEAL Cole Hart and his mother, Eleanor, have been recognized for their courage and integrity during the investigation. Cole grinned from across the room. Guess we made the news again. Eleanor sighed good-naturedly. I'd prefer the quiet kind of fame next time. Chloe approached, setting down a plate of pie. On the house, she said. Apple cinnamon, Mrs. Hart's favorite. Eleanor chuckled. You remembered. I remember everything you taught me, Chloe replied, eyes glimmering. You told me courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just choosing kindness when anger feels easier. The words made Eleanor pause. For a moment, she saw her younger self in the girl, defiant, idealistic, believing that goodness could still hold the world together. And maybe, she thought, it still could. Outside, townspeople worked together, clearing roads and repairing fences. What had been divided by fear was now united by gratitude. The sheriff's department had been replaced by new leadership, chosen by vote. Evelyn had started volunteering at the local shelter, helping families affected by the corruption. And the Harts, mother, son, and dog, had quietly become the heart of the town's rebirth. That afternoon, as the sky turned gold, Cole walked Ranger down by the lake. The ice was breaking apart in slow, delicate sheets. The sound of water trickling beneath was soft, a promise that the world would thaw again. He stopped by the old wooden bench where his father used to sit, brushing off the snow. Ranger hopped up beside him, tail brushing against his leg. Cole took a deep breath, feeling the crispness of the air fill his lungs. You did good, buddy, he said quietly, scratching the dog's neck. You always do. Ranger barked once, low and content. Eleanor joined them a few moments later, wrapped in her shawl. She sat beside her son, eyes on the horizon where the sun dipped into the mountains. Your father used to say the light after a storm is God's way of showing us he never left. He was just waiting for us to look up. Cole turned to her, smiling softly. He was right. They sat there for a long while, the three of them, woman, soldier, and dog, watching the world return to color. As twilight deepened, church bells rang faintly in the distance. From the town square, people gathered for the first community prayer since the arrests. Cole helped his mother to her feet, and they walked back together, Ranger trotting between them, leaving a single trail of prints across the snow. When they reached the square, the crowd fell silent as Pastor Miller spoke. In our darkest season, we forgot that light does not vanish. It waits, and sometimes God sends that light through ordinary people with extraordinary faith. Eleanor felt her son's hand tighten gently around hers. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they weren't born of pain. They were gratitude. She whispered, We made it, Cole. He nodded. We did, Mom, because we never stopped believing the truth would find its way. Ranger barked once, as if agreeing. The sound echoed through the square, warm and alive. Above them, the snow began to fall again. Not a storm this time, but soft, shimmering flakes drifting gently in the golden lamplight. Eleanor smiled through her tears. Snow again, she murmured. Cole chuckled. Guess even heaven wanted one last look. The town laughed softly, their voices mingling like music against the falling snow. Maple Ridge, once scarred and silent, had found its way back to grace. And as the bells tolled in the distance, Eleanor whispered the same words she'd told her son as a boy long ago. Even in winter, the light will find us. Sometimes God does not calm the storm around us. Instead, He gives us the strength to stand through it and the heart to forgive when it ends. Just like Eleanor and Cole, we all face winters in our lives when injustice, pain, or silence test our faith. But even in those moments, God is still working quietly, shaping light out of darkness and peace out of chaos. The miracle is not that the snow stops falling, but that love still grows beneath it. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that God still moves through ordinary people. Leave a comment to tell us what you believe about miracles, and type Amen if you pray for His light to guide every home watching tonight. Remember to subscribe, so together we can keep spreading stories of hope, courage, and the quiet miracles that prove God never leaves us. May He bless you and your family with peace and faith always.